Welcome to Scandal Water,
where we cover the stories that have captivated the entertainment world.
I'm Candy, a longtime educator and community theater actress.
And I'm Ashley, a writer and co-founder of a local theater group.
We're two friends who share a love of entertainment.
From true crime docuseries to blockbuster movies to classic TV to Broadway shows and everything in between.
Each week, I share a compelling story related to pop culture.
And I chime in using my trivia junkie brain.
We stick to the facts until it's time to settle into our armchairs at the end.
Then we're simply two women with a strong cup of tea and even stronger opinions.
We're Scandal Water.
And if this sounds like your cup of tea,
follow the show on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Ashley.
hello, Candy.
You know, I was driving in this morning and I was thinking how gorgeous it is outside. 62 degrees, just a tiny bit cool, but just so sunny and pretty. And I was thinking about how we're heading into this new month, May, which for us personally, I think is a very exciting time. I know you are looking forward to a trip, right?
I am, yes.
Yes, you get a break.
I get a break from school. I am in my last week of 15 weeks in a row of class.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
It is a lot. By the time this week is over, I will have written 22,000 words for my nonfiction book. Yes, it is.
Well, and I'm excited. We've got Derby coming up and I've got a play coming up. So lots of excitement coming up. But thematically, we're going into something that's just a little darker, but fascinating, right?
Yeah.
We decided for May, we were going to do the theme of medical May or medical mayhem. We're going to be talking about two big cases. These are ones I think you guys have probably heard of. I know the one we're talking about today. It is so well known.
I would assume so.
I feel confident that a lot of people are going to recognize this case. But if you're like us, even though we have followed this quite a bit, it's so big. I think you either forget the details or you're not quite sure how it all played out. So I think even if you're familiar with it, you're going to find this one fascinating. So for our little hook, I'm going to play a brief clip from the woman who is at the center of this all.
What's the clip going to sound like, Candy?
That was a good hint.
This is what happens when you work to change things. First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
This is what happens when you try to change things. That voice. Girl, why?
Well, we'll talk about that because we're going to come back to that. Tell them who it is, Ashley.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes. In 2014, you guys, this woman was declared the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world by Forbes. When she spoke these words in 2015, however, it was just after an article had come out claiming that she and her company, Theranos, had made false claims about their defective technology at the risk of the people whose blood had been tested with it. So that's the essence of the case that we're going to be talking about. This, you guys, is going to be so big and so interesting. So get ready.
Get ready. Strap in.
Strap in. Ashley, what's your background with Elizabeth Holmes and this whole Theranos case?
Well, Lauren and I watched what is it called? The Dropout?
Yep.
The miniseries, and we thought it was completely nuts. We thought Amanda Seyfried was phenomenal.
She was.
In the role.
Yeah, she won an award for that too.
Although I have not read the book, but I did also listen to a podcast before I saw the miniseries about her.
I've actually read the book. It was called Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup. Now, I read it many years ago. The TV series that you referenced came out in 2022. It was, as you said, The Dropout, starring Amanda Seyfried as Elizabeth Holmes. Now, something that I learned through this research was that was fictionalized. Obviously,
yeah.
Because they made it for TV, they had to kind of
combine stuff.
Yeah, add some narrative to it. Since I started researching, I found also a documentary called The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley, which came came out in 2019. Watch that. Very interesting, a nice little summary. And then because the TV miniseries was based on the podcast series, The Dropout, that began releasing back in 2019, I ended up going back and listening. I did not have time to go through the whole thing. So I focused on the first series that came out in 2019, where they basically walked you through the story. And then I went back at the end and caught some of the follow-up.
The follow-up. I think the podcast I heard was American Scandal. Their take on it. Lindsey Graham narrates that. I don't think I heard the Dropout one, but there's lots of podcasts out there about this. Because nobody can believe this happened.
It is so unbelievable. And again, I'll reiterate. I've read quite a bit. I've seen quite a bit. So have you. But doing the research, it's just such a huge story. You don't remember all the details. You'll be like, oh, I forgot that was how that played out, or that this particular thing happened. So interesting. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. So Elizabeth was born in February of 1984 to wealthy parents who had impressive resumes. Her mother, Noelle, had served as a foreign policy and defense aide on Capitol Hill before stepping away to raise her family. And Elizabeth's father, Christian, worked at a number of different jobs, but just to give you an idea of a few that he held, here's a quick quote from a People magazine article. In addition to holding different roles at the United States Agency for International Development, Christian worked for the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
Wow.
Acclaimed background for her parents, right? According to Elizabeth, her father's humanitarian work had a big influence on her. Another factor that influenced her career path, she said, was her discovery at a young age that she would really love to create and build things. She would talk different times in interviews about creating a detailed design for a time machine when she was only 7 years old.
Okay.
Yep. And then she said that it didn't take her long to realize that one of her big dreams was to use the tool of business to affect change in the world.
Okay. She's an entrepreneur. Got that entrepreneurial spirit.
And started at a very young age. Now, she said that she was very studious in school, and she even commented, you know this, I know our listeners probably know this woman gave so many interviews. Things came straight from her mouth. I saw clips, I would hear her speaking in podcasts. So much of this is from Elizabeth herself, right? So she noted in one of those interviews, she said her best friends as she went through school were books. She was very focused on learning and action. She, in fact, decided she wanted to speak Mandarin.
I thought this was very impressive.
Yeah, in her spare time, she just started studying it. And she also said another interest for her was understanding how great leaders accomplished what they did. So, according to an article in the Stanford Daily, Elizabeth was a student at Stanford beginning in 2002, studying chemical engineering. And it was while she was at Stanford that she developed her idea that would eventually turn into the company Theranos. She noted in an interview that it was while she was at Stanford that she received her first patent. So she was a student and she was already making things happen. Interestingly, there was a woman named Dr. Phyllis Gardner, MD. She was a professor of medicine at Stanford while Elizabeth was attending. And you could tell from her interviews that she would give, primarily I think I saw her in the documentary, but you could tell this doctor was not that impressed with Elizabeth, unlike so many other people.
Yes.
She seemed to see right through her.
I think she did. And she had to feel so vindicated later.
Absolutely.
She's like, I knew this girl was no good. Who played her in The Dropout? It was the lady who played Jackie on the Roseanne Barr show, Laurie
Metcalf?
Yes, Laurie Metcalf, I think, played her in The Dropout, and she did a great job because you could tell she did not like her.
Yeah.
Didn't believe in her, didn't like her, thought she was full of cheese.
Well, in the documentary, she talked about how many students would come to her because, this woman had this background. She had helped many other students start businesses. These are brilliant kids, brilliant young people who would have these fantastic ideas for medical innovations, but a lot of them just had the ideas and didn't know how to actually make them work, right? And that is how she portrayed Elizabeth. She said Elizabeth came to her. It's interesting. Some sources, it sounded like it was just one time, but I think she herself said it was more than once that Elizabeth came to her with these ideas, and Professor Gardner would be like, it's not feasible. Great idea. Love it. There's no way to actually make that work medically. That's not how this goes. So Elizabeth ends up getting connected to a different professor who specialized in engineering and was the head of his department, and he was very taken with Elizabeth. That man's name was Channing Robertson, and his reaction to Elizabeth's idea was so different. He said in an interview that he had taught probably tens of thousands of students at Stanford, but he immediately knew when speaking to Elizabeth that he was dealing with something that was very, very different.
What do you think it is? Do you think it's that the girl and guy, like, could the lady see through her?
It's interesting. It does seem like the fellas tended to be more taken with her.
She was very pretty and very charming.
And very smart.
And smart. I mean, she's in Stanford, so there's no denying that she is smart. So what's the difference?
That's actually a question that I wanted us to talk about later as we keep going. No. But let's go ahead and at least give some general impressions to begin with. I think so much of people's impression on others is how they present themselves and how much confidence they seem to have in themselves.
Okay, so if that's the case, maybe with the other lady who was telling her, you can't do this, she had less confidence in the presenting, but this other fella, maybe she was able to trick him with her confidence.
And maybe it was that one's specialty was in business and medicine and the other's was more in the engineering field. Maybe this woman whose specialty was a little more tailored to what Elizabeth was trying to hit was like, I don't see how you can
So it may have had nothing to do with gender, but more to do with field.
Could be part of it. And also, I do think, we're going to talk about this in a second, but Elizabeth had an accomplished background. You know, she came from people who knew how to start businesses and of course she had the politics. Maybe she just almost had this little halo effect around her. You know what I'm saying? Depending on who she was talking to. Yeah. She may have come in already.
Dropping names.
Yes. And I think I can't think of a better term than halo effect. You know, sometimes you expect great things from somebody and then it's almost like confirmation bias. You see what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Or you hear what you're listening for.
Yeah.
But again, this fella, Channing Robertson, was taken with her and her ideas. He was all on board for helping her. So while Elizabeth was still only 19 years old and a sophomore, she dropped out of Stanford to try to realize her vision. And Channing Robertson would not only support her through the next several years, introducing her to some key venture capitalists and serving on her company's board, but he would actually start working for her in 2012.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I feel like she should have finished Stanford, although it's not going to do any good now. But it seems so not fruitless, but it seems silly to drop out of Stanford, although I know she did it because her idols did it. Like Steve Jobs dropped out. So she also felt like that was playing into the whole mystique of he dropped out, so I'm going to drop out.
Yeah.
I just think that's a lot of money. That's all I think about. That's a lot of money to go halfway and then quit.
She gave the rationale that she was wasting money because she wasn't attending classes. She was so taken with her proposal, her idea, that she was not actually going to classes. And so why not put the money
I get it.
where, you know, it could be purposeful. However, to your point, later we're going to talk about other people had your same opinion. In fact, one very notable reporter would say she should have stayed. People who really want to change the field, want to change medicine, have to know it at a deep level. You know, you have to do the kinds of things that she wanted to do.
I'm armchairing all over the place.
No,
she's just wild.
She is. But again, something about her made people believe in her and want to support her and go with her. She really, really did. All right. So here we are. Again, she's a 19-year-old dropout from Stanford when she launches her own startup company with her parents' blessing, by the way. A quote from the documentary says, using just her story as the blueprint for success, Holmes would convince private investors to put up hundreds of millions of dollars without ever looking at audited financial statements.
Wild.
End quote. Now, here's what I referenced just a minute ago. I gave a little preview. It did not hurt that one of Elizabeth's ancestors had created a hospital in Cincinnati. So that gave her some medical credibility. This was a person who was very influential.
A pedigree.
Right. While a different one of her ancestors was the person who founded the successful Fleischmann Yeast Company.
Okay.
Now, over the years, the family had actually, that wealth had dropped out, you know, from that. But this is still a family that had medical professionals, entrepreneurs, humanitarians in their background. Definitely helped her. The documentary noted that it conferred respectability, that was their phrasing, on Elizabeth, even though she didn't have any data or results behind her yet. Okay, now let's talk about Theranos and the mission behind it. So this was a mission that spoke to people. Here's what Elizabeth was trying to do. Now, she did not speak at engagements in her early years as a CEO, but of course we know that later she would do so much public speaking. So again, a lot of this comes directly from her. She would explain that the company's goal was for every person to have access to their own actionable health information at the time that it mattered to them. She would say that her company wanted, quote, a world in which no one ever has to say say, if only I'd known sooner. A world in which no one ever has to say goodbye too soon.
But isn't that sort of like My Chart now? Because doesn't a My Chart, when you get your test done, it sends it to My Chart and you can see it even before the officials look at it?
That is, I think, a step forward, but I think it's a little different than what she was trying to do.
Was she? Oh, I think she was testing for diseases that could be icy. So she's testing for a cancer or something that could show up earlier. If you do this particular blood test, you'll know that you have this and can treat it sooner.
You are leading right into the very next thing I was going to say. Yes. In fact, here we go.
Okay.
The name of Theranos was chosen because it was an integration of the words therapy and diagnosis.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth's quote about this was, if we can shift toward a model in which we're determining the onset of the disease in time for therapy to be effective, we will change outcomes. And so to your point, she would say that the way things currently worked at that time, and I think still probably today, to be honest, most people do have their labs done only periodically, like maybe once a year when you go to get your physical. And so there's a huge time lapse.
Yeah, so something can get worse.
Right. And it's like maybe a year. And also because you're not looking at it in these frequent intervals, you might miss things because there's such a big gap there. She said, if you could easily and almost painlessly have your blood analyzed much more frequently, maybe once a month, for example, then instead of isolated snapshots over time, she said it would be almost like seeing a movie of your health. You'd have a bigger picture. You could see where your health was heading, perhaps, and again, hopefully catch changes in your data much sooner than you would otherwise, which would be preventative. All right.
It's a good idea in theory.
It's an absolutely fantastic idea in theory. Now, to do this, they created a device they called the Edison, named, of course, after the famous inventor and entrepreneur Thomas Edison.
Which is interesting because Edison is purported to have stolen Tesla's work.
Well, and that is so interesting. To finish that thought, he once said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And so Elizabeth would say that was their spirit. You know, they were going to fail 10,000 times because on the 10,001st, they were going to be successful. You know, she had that same spirit. But in the documentary and in the podcast, different places, they would say Edison was the king of making promises he could not yet fulfill. He would say that he could do things. And a few times at the last minute, he was able to come through with that promise. But he would say he could do things when he could not yet do those things. Yeah.
So I guess it was the perfect
It was a good match.
name.
Yeah. So again, just to make sure that everybody understands what the goal was, the idea behind the Edison was that it was going to be this small portable box. That was important. The size was important. It would be able to use only a tiny amount of blood taken from
drop.
the tip of a finger. Basically, you could keep it in this nanotainer instead of the way we normally have to have it drawn out of your veins, these big 2 or 3 different tubes. But still, even though it would only be this small amount, it would still be able to test that blood sample for hundreds of diseases. I didn't write this down, but I believe it was around 240. And basically in real time, this very short amount of time and for much less money than labs charged at that time.
And I think the reason for the amount of blood that they draw is because you have to have that amount to test it for different stuff. You don't have enough blood in one
Right.
drop to test
As-
240 different things.
With the current machines
With
that they
the
were
current-
using.
yes.
Absolutely. So Elizabeth referred to this as a remarkable innovation that was going to save millions of lives, and she often repeated the phrase that it was going to change the world. Now, ultimately, she wanted to have these Edison machines available in wellness centers across the U.S. She would speak of her dream of people having the ability to walk into a place like, Walgreens or CVS, and in just a short amount of time, with only that tiny nanotainer of blood, have it screened for these hundreds of diseases. But, of course, this was a complicated machine that they were trying to develop, and it had a lot of moving parts. Were you trying to jump in there? Did you have a thought?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't. No, I was thinking well, I guess I did have a little thought is I wonder if insurance, what was her deal with insurance? Because these tests have to be paid for. So what were her plans for, was it going to be private? You pay out of pocket for this stuff, or how would it work with insurance?
I don't know all those details, although I will say that that was a big part of her, a big selling point was instead of it costing as much. The simple fact that you could do it through this little machine, and that this machine, instead of having to draw all these different blood samples and run all these different tests, why this machine could do, it could screen you for 200 tests at the same time. So insurance is going to be charging you a lot less. You're going to be paying a lot less because you're cutting out so many of these other procedures.
And it could be consumer directed. So I could say, hey, I'm not feeling great. Or, hey, I want to come in once a month and I don't have to go see my primary care physician. I can just decide on my own.
And that is something, you nailed it. That is something that she would come back to. She would be like, it's a basic human right. It's your own health.
Right.
Why shouldn't you have control of your own health? Which, of course, appeals to your emotions.
Right.
It's my right to control my health. Yes, I want that. So absolutely, great selling point. But again, this is a complicated thing to come up with because, I mean, obviously, I don't know my technicalities here, but just surface level, there's so many different aspects that made this hard, from the fact that you're trying to run so many tests with so little blood, the requirement of having to keep the Edison box so small in size, the contamination, you had to worry about the contamination. Exactly. So all kinds of things that they were going to have to figure out. But like Steve Jobs and some of the other great inventors had done before, they knew that they would have to create the technology in order to realize their dream. That's what they set out to do. Doesn't exist? We will create this.
Okay.
Yeah. And you've already mentioned it. Speaking of those great creators and inventors, from the beginning, Elizabeth's role models were Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, the Google guys, as she referred to them. They would come up all the time. She would compare herself.
But they're tech. This is medical. It's two completely different fields.
It is, which is interesting.
But I guess she's trying to take tech and turn it into the medical field. So I don't know.
She's using the same model.
Yeah.
They were her role models, and she was like, if they can do it in that field, why can't I? And she would say things. I think that was another way of conferring credibility on herself, respectability on herself, was she would compare herself, that basically caused the audience listening to her to then make that comparison as well. Oh, she is like Steve Jobs. But she would say things like, when you have an idea that can change the world, it's up to you to make things happen, right?
Didn't she, in the Hulu thing, is this true or was this fiction, that she had on the wall painted, try, what is it? What is the Yoda saying? Do or do not, there is no try. She had that in the Dropout. She had that put on the wall. And people were like, are you for real? Are you for real?
I think she did. Now, I don't remember specifically seeing that, but I think there was a reference to Yoda somewhere that I ran across. Did you notice, this may have been in the documentary, which I don't think we both saw. Okay. There was a man who spoke, and it was so interesting because most of the people who spoke on that were people who were, right in the thick of everything, either an employee or a reporter or who knows. But they had one guy on there who was a behavioral expert.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, his name was Dan Ariely, if I've said his last name correctly. And so they would go to him sometimes, and he would just talk about kind of the behavior behind things, the psychology.
Yeah.
Thought he was fascinating. But he commented that one of the things that is so fascinating to people is, how did things go so far when you normally think about the fields of science and medicine, everything is so data driven. Everything is so, you use the scientific method, and there's so much proving, and there's so much vetting, and it's just very, very data driven. And he said so much of what Elizabeth would be doing had no data behind it all. And he commented on how she was so good with her storytelling. He said, data's great, but
hit them with the emotion.
Data doesn't stick in our minds the way stories do. Exactly. And he mentioned the emotions. Exactly. And so that was something that I did notice, a recurring theme. Everything I read about Elizabeth was how careful she was about the narratives that she created about her work, her company, the mission of Theranos. And this is where we're going to talk briefly about what we've already hinted at, her own identity, because that's something that she did. She was so intentional about working to cultivate her persona based on her role models. So here's a clip from the documentary that starts with Elizabeth being asked about wearing all black.
Because she did that because Steve did it, right? The turtlenecks?
And you're going to hear the voices of two different reporters because they've spliced some things together. But when you hear somebody speaking in the first person, that's Elizabeth.
Okay.
You wear black outfits a lot. Why? Because in line with the designing my life to be able to give every bit of energy I have to this, I have a closet that has a very large number of the exact same set of clothes, and every single day I put the same thing on, and I don't have to think about it. Steve Jobs used to say that too. You wore jeans. She was
obviously, Steve Jobs was her hero. And I just felt, oh, well, she's a young person. I'll give them their little hero worship thing,
I'm a tremendous admirer of what Jobs did. I think he was a genius. I do have to disclose that I've been in black turtlenecks since I was 7.
She sounded completely different in the first clip to the second clip. It took me a second to go, is that still her?
That's still her. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, what is up with the voice? Why did you, it just makes her sound more ridiculous to me. I can't take her seriously.
Okay.
I can't.
Well, all right, so let's talk about that. So, okay, the voice. This is actually something that has come up for me. I did a professional development one time. It was like over the course of maybe 4 days, this training went on. But one piece of it would talk about the importance of voice in establishing credibility.
Sure.
And it would talk about the fact that this is teacher focused for a second, but it would say, hey, teachers, think about the fact that you have 2 different voices. You have your
teacher voice.
Right, your approachable voice. That's warm. You're conferring with the student about their work. Now, why would you add that? What are you thinking about this? You use this really nice, warm, approachable voice. But if you're asking your students to do something and you want to be, it's your credible voice. If you want them to listen to you and think you're serious, then instead of using that warm voice that's friendly, that kind of lilts up and down, you use a credible voice. Students, I need you to sit down and open your books.
Yes, but that still sounds like you.
Right.
Students, I need you to sit down and open your books. It does. That's just creepy.
But I think it's the same principle.
She just took it too far.
I think here she was, this 19, 20-year-old girl. I'm not sure how old she was when she actually started using that voice, but she started that company young at 19. So I bet it was pretty fast. And I think they had some clips of some people who knew her when she was younger. And they said her voice was almost nasally. And I think that she needed to have authority. She needed people to listen to her, to think that she was believable. She knew what she was talking about. It would give her, how do you say it? Gravitas. Yes. And so I think it was a choice. Now, they talked to some employees who said she was great about never losing her voice. They only heard her mess up a few times. Like one time she was like at a company party and she'd had a few drinks and she went out of her voice. But I think it was this really intentional choice to try to make herself sound smart and impressive and credible.
I don't remember what Steve Jobs sounded like, but I'd be interested to listen to, maybe at the break we can listen to just Steve. What did he sound like? And is she trying to mimic even his voice? Did he have a lower timbre to his voice?
I'm going to guess it wasn't so much his voice in particular. I'm going to guess at this time you did not have a lot of females, especially young females who were creating startup companies. I bet it was to sound more male and masculine in general. But now to kind of go back to our clip that we heard, the podcast, The Dropout, shared that when Theranos was first starting, Elizabeth was so in awe of Steve Jobs and Apple that she intentionally tried to recruit or even poach some significant Apple employees and was successful in several cases. There were several higher ups that she managed to pull away. One of those was a person named Anna Ariola who came on board, and a Newsweek article identified Anna in this way. She had previously worked for Adobe, and when Holmes hired her, she was a senior product line manager at Apple. Ariola was well known in the tech world as one of the members of the original iPhone design team.
Wow.
Okay, so this was an impressive person. Yeah. Now, they went on to reveal in the podcast that it was Anna who inspired Elizabeth to adopt that signature look. Anna said in those early years, Elizabeth would come to work wearing frumpy sweaters.
Yeah, she looked a mess.
Yes, looking thrown together. And Anna at some point suggested she looked more like a CEO, mentioning Steve Jobs' look.
Yeah, they did that in the Dropout miniseries as well. She had her hair was messy, it wasn't combed, and they're like, get yourself together if you want to be taken seriously.
Yes, exactly. And so that's when Elizabeth reportedly started wearing her all black outfits with her red lipstick. But isn't it interesting that in that clip, she denied that, right? Oh, just for full disclosure, I've been doing this since I was 7.
No, you haven't.
Oh, Steve Jobs had on jeans. But interesting. But it's clearly, she's like, okay, these are my models. What can I take from them? What can I...
But even as much as she admires Steve, she's also undercutting him. She kind of like made a joke about, well, he's in jeans. I'm even better than Steve Jobs because now I'm taking people from Steve Jobs.
Or at least I'm not just a copycat.
Yeah.
I'm my own person, yeah. All right. But moving back into this, while Elizabeth might have worked hard to recruit those Apple people, most of them left pretty quickly. In fact, according to a Newsweek article, the person we've just talked about, Anna, joined Theranos in 2007 as chief design architect to help design and build its blood testing device, but left after only 4 months.
Ooh.
The article said she quit because, quote, she learned Holmes had used an unfinished furnished an inaccurate device to test cancer patients before the machine had gone through the regulatory approval process. She walked away from the company, deeming its practices unethical.
Good for her.
A different Apple employee who left later reflected that Elizabeth just didn't run things the way a CEO should. So these are early issues, right? Okay. But by 2009, Elizabeth had been running Theranos for several years with a number of employees working under her. However, she was running out of money, and because of the state of the economy at that time, it wasn't a good time to try to do more fundraising. And this is where a man named Ramesh Balwani, better known as Sunny, enters the story. And we're going to talk more about that after the break.
There's not much we love more than spilling the tea with you every Tuesday. So, we've decided to occasionally take a moment to thank a few of our supporters who help make this possible.
Along with the fun, producing a weekly podcast also brings with it more time and expense than you might expect. Your financial generosity in becoming a member through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon, both of which can be found on our website or social media accounts, allows us to keep creating these episodes.
We'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to one of our current members, Jennifer M. As a thank you, Jennifer and anyone else who becomes a Scandal Water supporter will receive perks like discounts on merch and access to exclusive bonus content such as our minisodes.
If you'd like to hear your name on that roster, become a member using one of the links on social media or on our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com.
Until then, we lift our cup to you, Jennifer.
Cheers! All right, we are back. And to introduce Sunny, I thought I would play a brief clip.
So, company was low on the cash, and I knew this mission and what company was trying to do was paramount. So, I offered to help the company, and I ended up giving a $13 million personal loan, and it was interest-free. It was a good faith loan.
That's Ramesh Balwani. He goes by Sunny. He's a former software executive who sold his company just before the dot-com bubble burst and made millions. He'd worked at Lotus and Microsoft, and in mid-2009, he cut Theranos a massive check. But Sunny wasn't just offering a lifeline. He was also joining Theranos as an employee.
After that, 6 months later, when I had decided that I'm going to stay here for the long term, and board said, absolutely, you must, they made me the president and COO.
$13 million personal loan, no interest.
No interest.
Do you have friends like that?
I do not.
Nor do I.
I'm also not dating somebody like that.
I'm not dating somebody like that
Okay,
either.
all right, let's talk about Sunny. So he's a huge part of this story.
Yeah. But okay. Do you think, even at this point, of making him the CEO, president, whatever, COO president, that she's like, if this goes south, I can blame it on him?
I don't think so, because my guess is she was so confident. I don't think
she thought it was going to fail.
Exactly. I think she was like, I know I'm brilliant. I know this idea is brilliant. I'm running out of money. Where can I get it? Here we go.
Were they were dating at the time he gave the loan?
Let's talk about this.
Okay. Let's talk about their timeline.
Here you go.
Okay.
Sunny and Elizabeth had actually met years before, around 2002, when they both participated in a Stanford University Mandarin program in Beijing, China. She was 18 at the time. He was 37. Now, what nobody knew was the two had been romantically involved for years before Sunny stepped in with this huge personal loan in 2009. Obviously, you heard, we know he has money, right?
Yeah.
They talked about his background with business and software companies in that clip, but you also probably picked up on the fact that they didn't say anything about healthcare or medicine.
No.
He had no background in any of that.
No.
But yet he's the COO, and the president. All right. And this man is going to be in charge of the day-to-day work that's going on in Theranos. And he's going to oversee creation of the Edison device and lab testing and all the things. Now, it's interesting that Elizabeth and Sunny were together all the time at work and living together for a large portion of the time that they were in a relationship. And yet Yet none of the Theranos workers seemed to have any idea.
That's wild.
I know, but that's something a few of the employees did speak about in the podcast and or the documentary. Now, a point they brought out was that, especially when Elizabeth would later start doing all the media talks and interviews and public speaking engagements, it was almost like this big pat on the back to her. A lot was made about how Elizabeth just seemed to dedicate her entire life to her mission at the expense of her personal life.
But it was not at the expense of her personal life.
Exactly. Yeah, one employee called her monk-like and stoic. A reporter named Ken Aletta, who interviewed Elizabeth and wrote an article entitled Blood Simpler for the New Yorker in 2014, said it was one of the reasons he was so impressed with Elizabeth when he met her and was interviewing her to research for his article. He was quoted in the documentary as saying this, "But you know, her story is so compelling. I mean, if you think about it, you go in and you see this woman lives in an apartment. Basically, she called her an apartment a mattress. The only thing in the refrigerator was bottled water. She ate all the meals at the office. She slept 4 hours a day. She worked in the office until midnight or thereabouts. You ask, do you date? No, I don't have time. I'm married to Theranos." That's literally her words. He said that level of dedication gave her credibility to him, and he 100% believed her. The whole time, of course, she's dating Sunny.
Yeah.
The point again, what I'm getting to is very few people, if any, had any idea the two were a couple. They just saw them as Eagle 1 and Eagle 2, which was a nickname they had for them, the two people running Theranos. Elizabeth was basically the public face, the visionary, the person overseeing the big picture, while Sunny was over the finances, daily operations, and was often referred to as the enforcer behind his back. Employees said he could be a bully. It also sounded like a lot of people had some resentment over how hard he would come down on people, especially when they felt like he had really no idea of what their job entailed or how things work. Now, I haven't said this yet. We're kind of trying to bring this to a close. In my mind, the focus of this whole part 1 episode has been on Elizabeth Holmes and the rise of Theranos.
Yes.
Okay. This is such a big topic. Every now and then I have to take some shortcuts.
Okay.
So while there were, of course, a number of factors that led them toward the pinnacle of their success, which was around 2014, 2015, here are 3 developments that I think were hugely significant.
In the development of their success.
In the rise. Yes, in the
Okay.
rise. All right. And jump in here if you'd like to add anything. Number 1, in 2010, this team, Elizabeth and Sunny, found a great opportunity to form a partnership with Walgreens.
Yes.
Huge for Theranos. So Elizabeth and Sunny began discussions with Walgreens leaders about creating wellness centers inside of Walgreens stores, with the goal being that this would eventually be nationwide. And what would happen was, inside of these wellness centers, they were going to have Edisons set up, and these Edisons, these devices, portable devices, would be able to run hundreds of tests on customers' blood, basically in real time, using only a pinprick of blood, and of course, as we've already said, charging much less than labs would usually cost. Now, just for context, around this time, there were 2 companies who were dominating the lab industry, LabCorp and Quest, and these 2 companies together controlled almost 80% of the market.
That's a lot.
So to your point earlier about the costs, because they were monopolizing the market, these 2 companies could get away with overcharging for their services. So bringing in Theranos with this much simpler and more streamlined process would break that up. And that would have caused them probably to have to lower their prices. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the Walgreens leaders loved this proposal, of course. They were impressed by the fact that the Edisons had been used by the government in combat situations, which is something that they were told, which we, of course, know to be false.
Yeah.
Now, they didn't just agree to it, though. Walgreens said they wanted to send some of their own scientists out to learn more about the tech, basically to vet it.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth and Sunny agreed. Now, when it was sent, this team, one of the scientists on Walgreens' team was a man named Kevin Hunter, who spoke on the Dropout podcast about that visit to Theranos, and he talked about how strange it was.
Really?
Yeah, he had a lot to say, but I'm going to just pick up on 2 things that struck him. First, he said the whole purpose of the visit was to evaluate the technology that was at the center of this whole thing, and yet the Walgreens team members were not given proper access to the lab or the Edison in order to do that. That's weird, right? Secondly, he noticed how Sunny and Elizabeth seemed absolutely over the top, like paranoid when it came to security and protecting their trade secrets. He pointed out that Sunny even escorted him to the bathroom and waited for him outside.
Now, come on.
Yeah, they were kind of crazy. Now, the idea of Walgreens and this partnership was something the two companies would end up working toward for several years. Along the way, this fellow we've been talking about, Kevin, would become very concerned about Theranos' ability to actually fulfill their promises. And he even voiced some concerns at different times, but things just kept moving forward, and he eventually resigned to remove himself from the situation.
He got out while the getting was good.
He did. But again, this proposal, this partnership between Theranos and Walgreens, it continues to slowly move forward. And their first Theranos Wellness Centers opened in 2013. And this was huge for Elizabeth and the company. Okay. Number 2, in terms of the rise, right? Theranos had long had a board of directors, but it was in 2011 that they brought on a man who would change the game for them, George Shultz. Probably most notable for serving as U.S. Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan, but he is actually one of only 2 individuals to have served in 4 United States cabinet positions within the U.S. government.
That's huge.
Yeah. So suffice it to say that when George Shultz decided to serve on Theranos' board, it was a huge win for the company. But even better than that, George, who's in his 90s, I believe at this time.
When he was on the board?
Maybe upper 80s.
Okay.
Because he was with them for a while. Probably upper 80s.
Okay.
But he was so taken with Elizabeth and her mission that he actually took her under his wing. He would often actually have Elizabeth over to his house. In fact, they called him one of those family friends who would get invited for Christmas and Thanksgiving dinner.
Wow.
That's how close she became, right?
Wow.
But one time when she was over at the house, George introduced Elizabeth to his grandson, Tyler Shultz. Tyler was so impressed by the leader of Theranos and the mission of the company that after graduating from Stanford in 2013, he would end up going to work for Theranos. But let's stay right here where we are for a minute. In terms of the company's success, here's a move that George Shultz made that was incredibly significant. He started using his connections to bring other important people on board, like Henry Kissinger, another former U.S. Secretary of State, and William Perry, who was a former U.S. Secretary of Defense.
These are big dudes.
Big. Now, it's interesting because rather than having a board full of medical and health experts, which is what you might expect, it was primarily a board filled with powerful government leaders, former government leaders.
Yeah.
But this is significant in helping Theranos to gain investors, companies, people like the Walton family that runs Walmart and Sam's Club. I think they gave something like $150 million.
But you would think all of these guys, and none of you went, something seems fishy.
But it was almost a domino effect. In some cases,
Once you
it
grab
was like,
one, the others?
Right. It's like George Shultz is so smart and he's so
Henry
good.
Kissinger
and
thinks
he
it's
thinks
okay.
Right. Henry Kissinger thinks this is great. I'm following up with this. I'm going to invest too. In fact, Betsy DeVos, her family invested something like $100 million. I mean, they gave credibility to Theranos, and people who would just see the names of the board members would be like, oh, this is legit. This has been vetted. This is maybe something I want to be a part of. They might even say, you know what? I think the government's involved in this because look how many government leaders or former leaders are on this board.
This is wild.
So huge for Theranos. Last one. In 2014, a journalist named Roger Parloff wrote an in-depth piece on Elizabeth and Theranos for Fortune magazine. It was entitled, "This CEO is Out for Blood." In researching, isn't that clever? Yeah. In researching the article, Roger Parloff recorded something like 10 hours of conversation with Elizabeth, who he referred to as an inventor/entrepreneur. Now, this feature in Fortune represented the first time that Theranos had been spotlighted in a major magazine in this way, and Elizabeth was so highlighted in this. Her face was literally on the cover. One early investor said the glowing coverage of the company made him feel very proud of his decision to have invested in Theranos, but of course, it also encouraged a lot of new investors. In fact, in the podcast, they mentioned that a few of the big investors would later share that this Fortune profile, this Fortune article on Elizabeth was one of the materials that was included whenever they received their pitch, right?
Okay.
But this article also started Elizabeth on her path to stardom. Shortly after that article came out, Fortune invited Elizabeth to speak at the Most Powerful Women's Conference, even though she wasn't head of a Fortune 500 company. But Roger Parloff commented on the documentary about Elizabeth's confidence. He said you could tell she felt like she belonged on that stage because she was perhaps the only woman there who'd actually founded her own company and invented the whole concept behind it. So she was like, yep, I deserve to be here. Absolutely. And this was the start of a flurry of magazine articles and covers and speaking engagements and honors, like being named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in 2015. So to summarize, here we are. Around 2014, Elizabeth Holmes was a 30-year-old female in a male-dominated field who was running a company valued at somewhere between $9 to $10 billion.
That's so much money.
And it was, in fact, around this time that Forbes did name her the youngest female self-made billionaire in the world. Spoiler alert, by 2018, Theranos would be worth nothing.
Wow.
And we're going to talk about how it all came crashing down in part 2.
Armchair Psychologist.
Which brings us to our armchair. I know this has been a long episode, so we can keep this a little more brief if you like, but I have a question for you.
Okay.
So many people struggle to find success.
Yeah.
Even when they have a very strong quality product. Yet, even though Theranos at this point, another spoiler alert, they still really don't have their product working. They've got no data behind them yet. They still have some of the most powerful people in the world backing them, and they're valued at approximately $9-ish billion. So this kind of goes back to what we said before, but why do you think? Why do you think?
I guess, who said the quote first? If you tell a lie, what is it? Something like if you tell a big lie, you have to tell it with confidence, or the bigger the lie, the more confidence you have to have. I guess it all comes down to her personality, and she's just selling it. She is selling this lie and leaning into it because at some point you have to go, no way would somebody be this confident if none of this was possible.
Yeah, I think that was a huge part of it. I agree. I also go back to how smart she was at knowing and working her audience.
Yeah. Just think if she'd used all of that for good.
Right?
You know, she had everything going for her.
But here's the thing. I think she was convinced that...
Do you think she
I
thought?
think she believed, especially in the beginning.
In the beginning, maybe.
I think in the beginning she did believe it was
But
for
then
good.
I think the paranoia, when the paranoia started kicking in, I feel like maybe she had a clue this is not ever going to happen, but she was too deep. You think?
Could be, or it could be that along the way, and maybe even from the beginning, she was so caught up in how she thought she was so much smarter than anybody else and so much more brilliant and so much more
She's just a narcissist.
humanistic. And yeah, she would. I think that it became about her as much as it did about the mission. But it was funny because, you know, a lot of times when I have an armchair question, I don't even think about it and I come into it cold. This one actually hit me and I thought for a minute about this. And something that struck me was she ended up, it was when she started doing her public speaking engagements, somebody pointed this out, she was very, very repetitive. She kind of came up with her great speech, her great points.
And then just said the same thing?
Yes, she would recycle it over and over again. But that made me think about, well, what were her repetitious points?
Yeah, what did she say?
And I started thinking about this. She would hit on, now, and there were other things as well, but 3 things that came up almost every time. She would talk about her terrible fear when she was young, especially, of having her blood taken. And she would talk about how torturous it is. And think about somebody sticking something into your veins and sucking your very blood out of you. And so she would, I think in that example, she would speak to fear. She would appeal to, we all hate it.
Yeah.
I was scared of it when I was young. And so I think,
still am. I don't like it.
so that appeals to people on an emotional level, a lot of kind of maybe fear in there. And then one of the other things that would always come up was she would talk about this beautiful, loving relationship she had with her uncle, how they would spend holidays together and he was so fun and she just loved, you know, being at the beach with him and he loved the beach. But then he was diagnosed one day with skin cancer and before long it was cancer in his brain and cancer in his bones. And she would say he didn't get to see his son grow up and I never got to say goodbye. And she would go into the right to protect the health and well-being of every person, of those we love.
Yeah.
Is a basic human right.
So using her uncle story as this is what inspired me.
She would appeal to we've all lost somebody.
Yeah.
So she's appealing to our emotions there. Then again, back to that sense of justice. It's our human right.
Yeah.
And I think that so much of this goes back to how she created stories, how she created a story around herself and how she created a narrative that made everybody root for her company and what she was trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you not want that?
Yeah. I think we're just seeing an actual malignant narcissist rise, and then in the next part we're going to see the fall of it, because they're so charming and they're so confident. And the question we keep asking is, did she really believe this? And I mean, in narcissism, I think they do. I think you're right.
She totally believed she could do it. But it's interesting because you just made me think of one other point. I've listened to so many and read so many sources, I can't even remember who said this now. But at some point, somebody made the comment that everybody can have wonderful ideas. We all have brilliant ideas, but a lot of times it comes down to, it was an investor. It was one of the early investors. And they talked about how a lot of times if you're an early investor, you don't rely on data. You listen to the idea and you go, number one, is this a really great concept?
Yeah.
Is this something that would be beneficial to our world or, to people? Yeah. And number two, do I believe this person has the ability to make it happen and would dedicate their life to the purpose of making it happen? And this investor said, I believe that about Elizabeth. And I think that she made people believe that about her, not just him, but a lot of people. Well, join us, guys, next week, and we're going to talk about how it all unraveled.
Yes, and it unraveled fast and hard.
Yeah. For right now,
who do we want to cheers?
Who do we cheers?
You know what? I know who.
Okay.
I know who. The first lady that said...
Dr. Phyllis Gardner.
Yes, Dr. Phyllis, we're going to raise a glass to you because you saw all of this happening. If everybody had just listened to you, none of us would be in... we're not in this situation. Those poor people wouldn't have lost all their money.
Right.
Dr. Phyllis, this one's for you.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show or become a supporter through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Whether a single gift or recurring monthly donation, your support is what allows us to keep the tea brewing.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Show notes are available at our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com, where you can also access the merch store and more.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown,
that's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music, Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.